I got the feeling in my heart that I knew Nick was gone.
We have to hand it to the criminal. A conscious effort was made to conceal this crime from everyone.
Little did we know how gruesome, how terrifying, how sinister and dark this case was going to become.
I can't even believe that somebody could do this to a human being.
I don't know if they thought they were outsmarting us. You start questioning, is he really here?
He was a control freak, master manipulator.
This case never gets solved if it's not for incredible outside-the-box thinking.
Nick was missing for a year. That's a lot of time to get rid of a body.
On February 9th of 2017, the Massillon Police Department was contacted by the Barberton Police Department that is located just northwest of us, and they advised that a Nick Stein, a 25-year-old male, was possibly missing, and they wanted us to do a welfare check in our area. A woman named Paula Klein called the Barberton Police Department almost in an emergency state, believing that Nicholas Stein was missing and possibly harmed.
It's very hard to convince a police officer or even a detective that a 25-year-old boy is gone. Not that he's ran away, not that he's missing because he wants to be. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I can show you text messages every day. I can show you phone calls every day. Nick was just like my second son. When my son Gunnar got sick with brain cancer, most children, they just walk away because they fear the sick child. But Nick was his biggest fan. Nick kept him laughing, playing video games, hung out with him like he was just a normal kid. He never gave up on Gunnar, who is still alive today, and he's 31 years old. Nick had a heart of gold, would do anything for anybody.
We learned Nick came from a challenged background in regards to his family. That being said, probably resilient, looking to do more.
I kept in touch constantly with him. In text messages, on social media, the telephone. He would always call me for advice. Then he struggled with just trying to even find a job in the area.
So as an investigator, you first turn to social media, bank accounts, records, phones. All activity had stopped in regards to Nick Stein and his personal life. Nick just disappeared. But we learned he came to Massillon as he met a man named Brian Gentry. Nick believed that he could better his future by working with Brian.
Nick told me he wasn't making any money, and he said, Brian's giving me some work. I said, oh, I know this guy, I don't trust him. But he believed everything Brian told him.
So we decide we want to interview Brian Gentry.
Brian Gentry was renting a house on 8th Street. He was a decorated war veteran who fought 4 tours in Afghanistan before he was ultimately discharged from the military after suffering severe injury.
Him and his girlfriend, Kristen Lane, they decided they wanted to start a tree trimming business with Nick to cut trees in the summer and to plow snow in the winter. And with it being seasonal work, they decided it would be best to save gas money, to save time, that Nick just move in with them.
The couple had 3 small children living in the house with them, and then also another roommate, Carl Spencer, an old friend of Brian Gentry's from middle school.
Brian took charge of the house. He was the ringmaster. They were very cooperative, invited us in, answered our questions.
When we first arrived at the location, everything looked normal. When interviewed, the occupants of the house stated that Nick Stein had left on Wednesday, February 1st, and had not been seen since. They had been the last people that were known to have seen Nick Stein before he was reported missing. On February 9th,
the residents there were worried about Nick and his whereabouts. But Brian said that one of the reasons why Nick may have wanted to leave Massillon was because he possibly owed some people money.
Carl Spencer had stated that he remembered Nick Stein had left the house and was going downtown to a local restaurant and was getting a ride back to Barberton. We did spend hours looking for video footage from local residents, business, and ultimately there was no video located. This information provided by Carl Spencer ultimately leads you to question, was he trying to be deceptive and mislead investigators? So Carl was asked to come to the station for further interview. During our interviews, we're looking for potential signs that he already attempting to deceive us, and that deception can run very deep.
Have you ever been to someone's home? There for this game? Before. It was a 25 years ago, like in Spanish school.
As a detective, you're digging deeper into that individual. You're always looking to get to the truth as fast as you can.
How was everybody when Nick left? Like, how was the vibes in the house? Well, it seemed okay. Anyone concerned or? See as hell. Okay.
Through Carl's interview, investigators found out that the 8th Street address was not your typical residence. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. Apparently, there was an argument, and Nick got upset and left that evening.
Do you know what the argument was about? Not fully. I'm assuming it was whatever their relationship was. Like they had some whatever you call that, some threesome? Yeah, threesome. Okay.
Carl Spencer said that Brian would allow Nick to have sex with Kristen, but only if they would ask Brian first before they did so.
Brian was well aware of the sex triangle. But Nick was such a kind-hearted, lovable person. He wanted to find a girlfriend to love him and get married and have a family. He probably treated her better than she'd ever been treated.
Once we found out about this love triangle, we didn't know what dark alleys this was going to take us into.
We look back on those first interviews. A lot of details weren't given, and that's why it was imperative that we return to the residence. And upon further conversation with Kristen Lane, she did state that she was in a relationship with Nick Stein and also Brian, and she said that Nick wanted to have an exclusive relationship with her, and there was an argument. Kristen stated that she was not interested in being in an exclusive relationship and that Nick got upset and left that evening.
Once we hear this, we started wondering, there's way more going on here than just a missing person. When the two guys are sexually active with a single female, then somebody lets their feelings get involved. Bad things tend to happen.
So during questioning, the occupants invited us into the home to have a further look.
When we went into the basement, we had to climb down a ladder. The stairs were missing. I asked Brian about the stairs, and he said that due to his injuries in the Army, the VA recommended that he replace the stairs. So he took them out, and they were going to be replaced shortly. While we're interviewing them, there was a mattress down in the basement that had a stain. So I asked Kristen about this stain, and she said, "Oh no, I spilled cola on the mattress." But if something bad did happen to Nick, I thought to myself, is this evidence? We decided that we were gonna swab this spot and send it off to be tested. After we left that house on 8th Street, Detective Dasman and I, we looked at each other and thought, where's Nick? I'm gonna find Nick one way or another. Little did we know how horrific this case was going to get.
The Massillon Police Department was advised that Nick Stein, a 25-year-old male, was possibly missing from his residence on 8th Street. After we interviewed the occupants of the house, we began to think this was a cat and mouse game. Are these individuals trying to steer you in the wrong direction? And seeing that stain on the mattress certainly sparked interest that it potentially could yield DNA of a victim.
If it was blood, whose blood is it? About a week later, we get the information back that it was not human blood, that it was in fact soda that Kristen had spilled on the mattress, just like she told us.
Certainly a letdown emotionally, and sometimes you feel like you have to start over at square one.
Without a body, we're like, man, where do we go from here? If in fact Brian or Kristen or Carl did do something to Nick Stein, these people went to great extents to conceal any kind of evidence. At that time, Paula Klein is calling, and I felt motivated by wanting to give her answers.
Calling Detective Sleuts, he's probably thinking I'm crazy. But I was Nick's voice. I was the only voice Nick had. Nick's father passed away in 2008. And then after that, his mother struggled to get on her feet and make it because she hadn't worked for a few years. And it was just him and his brother. So I was like Nick's second mom. My main goal was to find Nick, and I was adamant about it. I just wouldn't let Detective Sleuts stop.
So in the spring, I get a phone call from Nick's brother. He believes Nick made it back home to Barberton.
And he believes that Nick's mother's boyfriend, Andy, was somehow involved with the disappearance.
Nick wanted to take close care and watch over his mother. He wanted to get a job and he wanted to take care of her. Her boyfriend wouldn't allow it. He was so jealous of Nick. When the search was going on for Nick, you would think that her boyfriend would be out looking. Well, he never left the house. And he wouldn't allow Nick's mom to leave the house. He was a very sneaky and conniving person. That's what made me more curious that he might be behind it.
I asked Nick's brother to meet me at a local ice cream shop in Massillon. He hands me 3 pieces of paper he just found that he claims that his mom's boyfriend wrote out and it had some very disturbing comments.
There was one passage that was very disturbing, and it was quoted, "My name will be spoken of and feared for generations. I will bury this bloody crime deep within the earth." Nick's brother stated that he believed, based on those deranged writings, that it was possible that Nick was buried in a wooded area near Nick's mother's home. We then decided to speak to the boyfriend, Andy, and he just said he had a lot going on in his life. He was a dark person and just put things to paper, but those writings were unrelated to the incident that we were investigating.
Even so, we wanted to focus more on Mom's boyfriend. Next, we contacted Barberton Police Department, and they sent out officers to check the area and to look for any disturbances in the dirt or possibly any shallow graves, any kind of sign that there was a body buried in these woods. It's months since anybody's heard from Nick. About this time, we start looking into Nick's disappearance, of not being a missing person, but more of a possible homicide. We try to determine, where's he buried? Whoever was responsible, they're trying to get away with murder.
So at this point, we're coming up on 4 months in the investigation, and we had a true victim, Nick Stein. Friends and family wanted answers. If Nick's mother's boyfriend, Andy, had committed a crime, it's our job to figure out what his involvement was. We felt like maybe there could be something in those woods in Barberton that could help us resolve this case. But you have a lot of ground to cover, you have foliage, you have the lack of witnesses in that area. So it's very difficult to certainly find what you were looking for.
Barberton Police Department sent out officers to check the area, and they were unable to find anything. So that's another dead end.
It was emotional when Detective Slutz would call and tell me that, we looked in the woods, we didn't find him. It would send me downwards, but that's what made me push stronger and never to give up on him. I even asked my mother, who was 72 years old, if she would go around and look in the wooded areas around Barberton. My mother would look and find stuff and send me up pictures and ask me if that was Nick's clothing, Nick's shirts, Nick's shoes. And it never was.
As a police officer, you hit those lows that you go, am I looking in the right direction? If this is a homicide, the people responsible for this went to great lengths to cover this up.
So in the law, there's a concept called corpus delicti, and it means body of the crime. Ultimately, what that means is you have to have more than just words itself or just the claim itself. You have to have tangible evidence that is found, whether it be circumstantial, concrete, or testimonial, and we just didn't have that.
So now we're in the middle of summer. We're not finding any information on Nick. As a detective, you try to separate your personal life from your work, and this one lingered with me. I would stay up at night thinking about who I need to talk to, what can we do different. I didn't want it to end up in the cold case files.
Then we were made aware that Nick's roommate, Brian Gentry, was arrested for receiving stolen property and sent to prison. Although Brian Gentry was incarcerated, Carl Spencer and Kristen Lane are still living in that house together, and she was pregnant. Carl Spencer was the father. Now, there was more than just a love triangle. Carl Spencer was involved with these individuals as well.
Matters of the heart certainly can be a motive for murder. It's one of the oldest ones. If not for greed and money, then love, lust, revenge, or hate.
But at this stage in the case, we knew that there was no proof that a crime had been committed without a body.
At the end of January, we get a call of some abuse or neglect of the children at the house. We did an investigation and got a warrant for Kristen's arrest for child neglect. So she gets arrested and is in the Stark County Jail.
And then a confidential informant contacted me. This confidential informant was someone that I had worked with for several months, and he was reliable.
Once Brian went to prison, Kristen had other people over to the house to continue to party. Kristen had our confidential informant at her house.
So this confidential informant stated that he heard that Nick Stein was buried somewhere in Massillon. However, he was unsure of the location. There are certainly moments as an investigator where you feel that what you've been working on has changed, the mood has changed, it is sinister, and you want to reveal what that is. We knew that we had to go back to that common ground, and that common ground was 8th Street on the southwest side of Massillon.
We go to the house. Carl's moved out. The homeowner is at this house, and we explained to him that there's an investigation going on, and nobody's heard from Nick Stein for a year.
While speaking with the landlord, his son emerged with a black box. As we opened that black box, we found the ashes of a human body.
So I look at this box and I think, where's the name at on this box? Could this be Nick?
Based on the information provided and Nick's last whereabouts being the 8th Street residence, when given the ashes and remains of a human body, at the time, the obvious question was, who was this? Where did these come from? We later found out through Paula Klein that those ashes, in fact, belonged to Nick Stein's father.
Nick's father tragically took his own life when Nick was 17 years of age. And from then on, Nick struggled with trying to find the man that he wanted to grow up to be. His father guidance was no longer there. I knew at that point that Nick was no longer with us here on Earth. I knew that Nick would never leave his father's ashes behind. But I kept saying, keep up the fight, never give up.
Throughout this entire investigation, Kristen has danced around questions pertaining to Nick. And we know that Kristen is in jail at this time. It could be a big break in the case. So I told Detective Dattisman, we need to go over and talk to Kristen at the county jail. I felt like it was the right time because she wanted her 3 kids back. Now is your time to help yourself and help us.
Today is January 30th, 9:40 a.m. I'm to take a swim to certificate of attachment, and you are Kristen Lane, correct? Yes. Listen, you're free to go anytime you want.
The challenge of being a detective is obviously working with individuals who are trying to deceive you. They want to take you down that wrong path.
I think you know what we need to. All right?
Organizing is the mixing.
It is the mixing. Okay? And things are starting to come together for us. Okay? And we feel that you know some things, and we just want to put it out there that you can either be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution.
This was a long, drawn-out interview. She was sending us in circles, but she continued to mention Carl Spencer.
So that's what because he was there that night, but then we ended up leaving, but came back early the next morning. I don't know if maybe he hasn't knew, because shortly after that, Carl told us that he liked me, and at the time Brian wanted to have a whole 3-person relationship thing.
She shined light onto Carl. She still would not give specific information.
With Carl, do you think if he did kill her, would he bury him or would he bury him?
So after interviewing Kristen, there was certainly a pause or a moment for detectives to wonder if it's possible that Nick Stein was in fact buried on that property this entire time.
We thought, boy, if he's buried in the backyard, this is pretty bold.
There was never any signs of disturbed earth or anything that would give us a motive to believe that there could be potentially a body buried in that yard.
We started thinking, what tools would they need to bury Nick? Are they gonna use just a shovel? That would take a lot of work and a lot of strength to dig a hole deep enough to bury a body in the backyard. I thought to myself, well, maybe they rented an excavator.
We contacted a local business in Massillon, and they did dig through their files, and they were able to locate a receipt, and there was a rental agreement on February 2nd of 2017 of a Kubota backhoe. And the name on that rental agreement was very familiar to us.
And I about had a heart attack.
The receipt provided to us by the manager did in fact say Brian Gentry. And he then provided us a driver's license. And on that driver's license, the picture was Carl Spencer. Our prime suspects in Nick's disappearance clearly become Carl Spencer and Brian Gentry. We reached out to BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and they were asked to provide cadaver dogs at that time. We arrived at the residence to ultimately start digging in that backyard.
It's the first day of February in Northeast Ohio. Well, it's cold. The dogs start hitting in this area. And we dig for hours. And we're not able to find Nick. It was very disappointing. Took a lot of wind out of our sails. You start questioning, is he really here? I told Detective Dattisman, we need to go back over and talk to Kristen again. It was an audio interview at the Stark County Jail. Now's your chance to tell us the truth, to save yourself. We show her this picture, of us digging in her backyard. And I ask her, what's this picture of?
That's the old house.
What are we doing today?
Taking up the yard. Why?
Why do you think? Why? Now's your chance to tell us the truth.
We proceeded to show her the receipt from the rental place, and we just let all this build up so that way she could tell us her story.
I don't know why the excavator was there. I was told it was for some job. I don't ask questions when it comes to that because I don't know anything about that.
We thought, okay, you're not telling us the truth. So I take out this piece of notepaper and I draw a diagram of their backyard. I'm gonna do my best artwork here. And I slide it over in front of Kristen. And I slam my pen down. And I say, where's Nick? As a matter of fact, I'm gonna take that off you. And she looks at me. She picks up the pen and she hesitates. And she circles right near this cement pad. After she draws this circle, I tell her, I want you to write in that circle what's there. And she looks at me and she looks down and she proceeds. And it's like darn near in slow motion because of the excitement that I'm feeling inside. So she writes the N, she writes the I, she makes the C. And I'm thinking, hurry up and write that K. And she makes the K. And it was just silence in this interview room. And inside I'm thinking, holy she just told us where Nick is.
Kristen Lane circled a location in the backyard where Nick's body was.
She knows that, hey, we're caught now. It's time to save my own butt.
We had enough probable cause to take a second dig in the backyard. As we dug further into the ground, there was a point where an odor had rised into the air, and there was a black box that was barely visible that had been cracked by the excavator.
Their coroner investigator jumps down and looks in this hole, and he goes, there's skeletal remains in there. We were also able to determine that they encased his body in cement within that box, which hampered our investigation the day before with the cadaver dogs being encased in cement. This odor of a decomposing body isn't as strong.
It was a feeling of great relief that we had found what we were looking for, although we had not confirmed that it was Nick Stein yet.
Well, police have not released his name at this point, but we can tell you the remains were taken to the Stark County Coroner's Office. For the second day in a row, BCI agents and police were out here. They were digging up this backyard, and this morning a body was found stuffed in a container right in that area that you're looking at.
The next day, Detective Danisman and I went to the autopsy, seeing this body folded up, basically, and encased in this cube of cement. It was horrifying to see. As the coroner's chiseling the cement away from the body, I thought to myself, nobody deserves to die like this. I mean, there's no other way to describe it except for pure evil. Through fingerprint analysis and dental records, we were able to determine that the remains in that box were the remains of Nick Stein.
One of Detective Sleuths called me the morning before they were going in for the last dig. And I knew that I couldn't be there. And I knew that Nick's family wouldn't be there. But that was probably my lowest point, where I couldn't be there when they finally found him.
Even though we had closure for the family, we still didn't end our investigation there.
We had information that Carl Spencer might be in the Marlboro Township area, located east of us about 30 minutes. And detectives located Carl and advised him we had a warrant for murder for his arrest.
And then Carl Spencer told us how the murder of Nick Stein happened.
Okay, so that day, February 1st, Brian and Nick get into an argument, am I correct? What was the argument about?
He had said that vulgar comment to Kristen.
That make Brian mad, or what?
Yes, that infuriated.
But what's he say down there?
He said that he wanted to beat his ass.
Okay.
Because he didn't think that was right for him to say that. Nick decided to lay down on the couch.
Okay.
He had taken like 3 Ambien.
Okay.
And he passed out. And we went upstairs and grabbed duct tape out of the mudroom, and he started tying him up. He ripped him off the couch, and he punched him for a good 10-15 minutes. He drug him to the house, into the mudroom, put him at the top of the steps, and told me to push him down the steps.
So did you push him down the steps?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was so upset and sick to my stomach, I went out the back door to puke off the back deck. I come back in about 5 minutes later. Nick was drugged further into the basement, and he was dead. And then from there, we proceeded to use a tote. He emptied a tote out. We put him in a tote, carried him up outside. Brian already had concrete there. He poured concrete in the box.
Ultimately, the 3 individuals pled guilty as opposed to having trials for their guilt or innocence. Kristen Lane pled guilty to abuse of a corpse, obstructing official business, and tampering with evidence, and received a 4-year sentence. In his connection with his testimony against Brian, Carl takes a plea deal and is sentenced to 11 years. Brian Gentry was sentenced to life in prison with parole at 15 years for the murder of Nicholas Stein. Sometimes in our profession, we have to hand it to the criminal. Where Nick was buried was not corroborated by the dogs, and particularly because he was encased in cement and 8 feet below in February. And Brian Gentry has a background in landscaping and heavy machinery. And he hit Nick in an unwitting neighborhood in an unwitting town. He made a conscious effort to hide this body in plain sight. Quite honestly, he may never have been found if but for some incredible outside-the-box thinking.
Brian Gentry was very smug. Felt like he was a little more intelligent than detectives were. You know, it motivated me more. It's like, okay, I'm going to figure this out and you're going to prison for it.
They released Nick's body to me. At one point, there was a little talk from some friends that they thought Nick's body needed to be buried. And I put my foot down to him and told him absolutely not. Nick would not be buried in the ground again. And I was able to have him cremated. It's when we took the move to buy 2 Tree of Life urns, and we put Nick in one and his father in the other, and they match. Then I decided to have a memorial for Nick. I set his urn box on my lap, and I cried like a baby.
Kid comes up missing. You're scared, you're worried.
No one would have believed that anyone would have gone to such lengths to hide a body.
There aren't words that can describe that feeling.
He took my wife, my child. I lost everything.
Her killer thought he was gonna get away with it.
Dig a hole and put her in it, or just cover her up.
Like some sort of Vegas magic act, he made the body disappear.
What better way to hide a body than in a cemetery?
And we came to the sewer drain. There were her remains, 18 years later.
In one barrel was the torso, and the other barrel was the head.
She was located encased in cement in a remote desert area.
He threw her into the mine shaft, too.
The come to Jesus moment is when everything is on the table. And you really have to wonder what happened.
Sau đây mình xin giới thiệu với tất cả các bạn bài hát Mặt trời bé con của tác giả Trần Tiến. Đây tác giả mình rất là yêu thích. Ngoài kia có cô bé nhìn qua khe nghe tiếng đàn của tôi. Ngoài kia có chú bé chờ canh me mắt rơi tròn lắng nghe. Đàn tôi hát câu gì mà sao cô bé cười ngộ ghê. Đàn tôi hát câu gì mà sao chú bé ngồi mơ màng. Hạnh phúc quá đơn sơ, đời tôi đâu có ngờ. Từng đêm cô bé chờ như cho từng giấc mơ. La 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 la. Ngày xưa cũng như bé tuổi còn thơ, tôi vẫn thường trộm nghe. Nhà bên có anh lính rời xa quê, hay chơi đàn rất khuya. Đàn anh đã cho tôi trời xanh như ước mơ tuổi thơ. Đàn anh đã cho tôi dòng sông mang cánh buồm khát vọng. Tuổi thơ đã đi qua, giờ đây hát bên em, từng đêm đứng quanh tôi như mặt trời bé con. La 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 la. Ngoài kia có cô bé nhìn qua khe nghe tiếng đàn của tôi. Ngoài kia có chú bé chợp canh me mắt xoay tròn lắng nghe. Đàn tôi hát câu gì mà sao cô bé cười ngộ ghê. Đàn tôi hát câu gì mà sao chú bé ngồi mơ màng. Hạnh phúc quá đơn sơ, đời tôi đâu có ngờ. Từng đêm cô bé chờ như cho từng giấc mơ. La 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 la. Ngày xưa cũng như bé từ còn thơ, tôi vẫn thường trộm nghe. Nhà bên có anh lính rời xa quê, hay chơi đàn rất khuya. Đàn anh đã cho tôi trời xanh như ước mơ tuổi thơ. Đàn anh đã cho tôi dòng sông mang cánh buồm khát vọng. Tuổi thơ đã đi qua, giờ đây hát bên em, từng đêm đứng quanh tôi nhưng mặt trời bé con. La 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 la. Trời mưa quá em ơi, bài ca ướt mất rồi còn đâu. Trời mưa đến bao lâu mà mà sao em vẫn chờ vẫn đợi. Hạnh phúc quá đơn sơ, đời tôi đâu có ngờ, từng đêm em vẫn chờ đợi dưới mưa. La 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 la. Hạnh phúc vốn đơn sơ, đừng quên các em thơ, từng đêm vẫn đón chờ những mặt trời bé con.
When did you think, I'm in a cult?
I probably realized I was in a cult the moment the cat stuff started happening. The message Cheryl would give about these cats were they were of God, and that we were to care for them with the utmost care and love and attention. And if we save these cats today, we will be saved in the day of Armageddon or the apocalypse. So we had to take the cats. No matter how many, no matter how much work it was, we had to take the cats if she said, take these cats. You couldn't say no. You did not have the right to say no. Like if we said no, then we'd have to leave. And why would you leave the person that's gonna save you when hell's gonna break out on earth? Why would you leave that person? You better just, buck up and take care of the cats so you don't die.
This is a story about family, faith, and felines. In the Pacific Northwest, a Pentecostal-style preacher
How deep has the covenant cut in your hearts?
Manipulates her followers' emotions.
The words she uses, the pulpit that she uses to draw people into her web, that's dangerous.
How come I was such an idiot?
Embraces bizarre beliefs.
Behold, the bride is Christ, as she is unveiled to come forth into her power.
She went from being a woman of God to a nutcase.
Our homes were filled with cats. Cats.
And moves to silence her doubters.
One violent move, one severe cut, and Jesus' head snaps.
She pounded it in my head that he's got to go.
Cheryl wanted Mark killed.
Remember, always think like Satan if you want to figure stuff out.
I think once you start down the path of evil, there's no end to it.
These photos go back, some of them before Mark and I got married in 2006. Mark had 2 boys and a girl. I had 2 boys and a girl. It was seemingly a perfect matchup. My name's Mary Walker, and I'm the wife of Mark Walker. We came together with a lot of hopes and dreams for a blended family, for the Brady Bunch. And this was, back at a time when we were still operating under the illusion that we had a great future in front of us as a blended family. And it was really apparent real fast that that was going to be difficult to achieve. Mark was really transparent and honest about what his ex-wife, Cheryl Walker Ruthven, was involved in, even at that time. When Mark first told me about Cheryl, I tried to get as familiar as I could with her. Although, it's hard to think about, how do I take it that his ex-wife is the bride of Christ? Not sure what to do with that.
Behold the bride.
Cheryl Walker Ruthven is a Pentecostal-style preacher based out of Bellingham, Washington. Her charismatic fire and brimstone-style preaching has attracted around 200 followers, and she's gained a reputation for pushing the boundaries of traditional faith.
I think the first time that I met Mark's children was a trip to Whistler. We took Mark's 3 children and my 3 children, and then a friend. So there was like, you know, baptism by fire, 7 kids, and a dog. When I first met Cheryl, it was after that trip to Whistler. When we got to the house, Cheryl was already in the driveway waiting for us. And so we went into the house and started unloading suitcases out of the car. And all of a sudden, you know, Cheryl came in through that opened door. And she's in the living room. And I just remember standing in the kitchen thinking that Cheryl was a bit of a threat.
Mark and Cheryl divorced in 2004. The settlement resulted in 50-50 joint custody of the children, but eventually the children spent more and more time with Cheryl. Now, in 2008, Mark's continued presence in the lives of the children is a source of frustration for Cheryl.
Mark never bowed the knee to what Cheryl wanted. Cheryl wanted to be the prophet, the pastor, and he was to be the subservient one, the one to uplift and allow her to follow God's calling in her ministry. So when he did not do that and he called her out on her, she was angry. And not only did he call her out on her, he divorced her and he fought for his rights for visitation with his kids. She did not want him to have any part of their lives or her life.
One violent move, one severe cut, and Jesus' head snaps, and she has his attention.
She was always trying to put herself out there as a victim of Mark. She was telling her congregation that he was manifesting demons, that he was a devil named Baphomet, and that I was a reincarnated temple whore named Ashra.
Desperate people do desperate things.
She despised Mark. She thought he was of the devil. And at the time, anybody in that inner circle, she would tell us he needs to die. That for her to go forward with what God's calling her to do, he had to die. So I remember in these smaller groups of prayer circles praying for his death. So I did that, and I'm very ashamed of it now. But back then, I thought he was evil and that he needed to go.
In 2008, a new member enters Cheryl's community, a man from New Mexico named Rick Madrid. And almost immediately, he sticks out from the rest of the congregation.
I'm a heathen kind of guy, you know what I mean? I'm just a guy. I ride motorcycles, and I grew up on horses and horseback, and I'm one of those guys. I drink beer, and I fight.
So Rick Madrid visited the church as a guest, and Cheryl was on him really quick, love bombing him, prophesying over these great prophecies.
He had this reputation as kind of a bad boy, and there was a seduction that happened.
She's nice looking, so there was a physical attraction as well as, you know, this good girl that she proclaimed to be. And when her and I would be together, when we were together, I mean, I would have visions. And there was some weird stuff going on. I mean, there was times where her and I, we were making love, and I'd close my eyes and we were floating down a river, and we were going under the water and in and out, down waterfalls. She got stronger and stronger the longer I was with her. She is something. I don't know what that is, but she is something.
He was seduced by her, and he ended up moving up to Bellingham, moved into the home, and then they married.
Everybody would walk around the church and proclaim how Mark is going to die. How she explained it was a spiritual thing. And I was the new spiritual father and the spiritual husband. I really thought that he was just going to fall over dead. I really did. She had told me constantly that Mark was supposed to die. And then he wasn't dying. And it was getting to her. It was bugging her bad.
And Cheryl starts commissioning Rick to do an evil deed.
In Cheryl's world, there are no accidents at all. So she pounded it in my head that he's got to go.
What will you do to attract my attention? How will I sort your prayers from all the others?
You never said no to the prophet. Never. And Cheryl wanted Mark killed.
Literally, she pounded it in my head that he's got to go. She went and bought an AR-15. We shot and shot and shot. We shot 1,000 rounds probably. And then it was little questions like, so how far is that over there? So then I'd shoot it. Well, how about that one over there? Can you hit that one? So it was going farther and farther, right?
Mark and I lived here for 10 years. Rick Madrid was here several times. Cheryl was with him in the car. She was sitting next to him. She was probably taking him through the layout of our home. And he knew what our driveway, what our approach looked like. And she had him here telling him all those details about our everyday life. And one day it culminated with him being at the top of the driveway. Mark was outside. Rick Madrid had the rifle with him and he leveled the sights.
So I went down there one day and I sat down the road from his house. Him and his wife are outside. And I was in the pickup and I had him in the scope.
And he had the rifle with him and he leveled the sights and he had Mark in his sights. And he had a God moment. Yes. And he decided not to pull the trigger. And we're certainly glad he did. Yes.
I'm very grateful. My name is Mark Walker, and I am the father of 3 children that are in a cult. And my ex-wife is the leader of that cult. I didn't know at the time that Cheryl was saying that I was the devil. I didn't know at the time that she was telling everybody in the cult to pray for my death. I didn't know at the time that she was going around and having my kids talk about different ways to kill me. My own children, I don't want to believe that my kids are evil, but they might be. I think once you start down the path of evil, there's no end to it.
The way I think about it now is it's ridiculous, man. I would never have gone to do something like that. I know that I was manipulated. The guys in her church were soft-spoken. They have no balls. They're not men. And then when she met me, I was different. So she kind of had an idea of the kind of guy I am. I think she had planned it all along.
What do you think stopped you?
Had to be God. When I put the rifle down and I drove away, I just knew that God had intervened.
Now, there's something to keep in mind. Mark did not learn about this attempt on his life for several years, and he never reported it to the police. So any fallout about this alleged murder plot, at this point, it's just between Cheryl and Rick.
When I went home, I said, if Mark Walker is supposed to die, why did God just intervene and save his life? Explain that to me, Prophet. Oh, you're more full of than a Christmas turkey, I told her. But I could have easily taken him out. And because I didn't, Cheryl threw me out.
If there ever was time of criticism against Cheryl, she would nip it in the bud as fast as she could. She publicly humiliated people all the time. If you spoke illy about her and she found out, she would admonish you in front of everybody and embarrass you.
I watched her humiliate men in front of their wives by making false accusations. She's the prophet. When you say no to the prophet, you suffer the consequences. If you did not do what Cheryl wanted you to do, especially something of that magnitude, you could pretty much count losing your life.
I met Cheryl in Spokane, Washington. My mom told me that I should go meet this gal that was working at Nordstrom's. She was attractive, friendly, charismatic, so I asked her out. We only dated 6 months before we were married. I was 23. I didn't understand who she was and what she was thinking, and I didn't date her long enough to figure that out. 10 months after we were married, we had our first child. We had Colin first. 3 years later, we had Landon. 6 years later, we had Olivia. I felt like it was my responsibility to stay married and figure out how to make it work. I was raised in a very conservative Christian family, and I always wanted to go to church, and Cheryl wasn't into church until she found Gates of Praise. At Gates of Praise, you would see things like people speaking in tongues, people doing exorcisms, taking demons out of people, things that I wasn't used to.
When Mark met Cheryl, she didn't seem particularly interested in religion, which is curious. In some ways, her discovery of Gates of Praise and the time she spent there is the origin story of a cult leader.
Gates of Praise was led by Debbie Lynch, and Cheryl was very attracted to her preaching.
He's looking for the leaders that will say, I need to cross over.
They became very, very close to the point of, I would say it's almost like an affair. I don't know if they were ever physical. There's a question that I don't know the answer to, but Debbie made her kind of like an associate pastor, and she loved that position of leadership.
My time, people. You're either going to love me or hate me, but you better have an opinion by the end of this night. Amen?
Listening to her sermons, it's clear that Cheryl relished the attention of her congregants and found her power to be intoxicating. In 2001, she split with Debbie Lynch and established her own small church called Freedom Fire Ministries.
Cheryl had no training to be a pastor. She'd never read the Bible, barely.
The purpose of all demonic soul ties is to bring you under that spiritual canopy of authority.
It made no sense whatsoever.
So here's the godly soul tie, here's the ungodly soul tie. The ungodly will buddy up to the godly soul tie, and all of a sudden I will start manifesting symptoms of cancer.
But I guess if you say enough things over and over again, something will come true, and people believed that she was a prophet of God.
When I came into the ministry, it definitely was mainstream Christianity. And then as she began introducing these different religions, well, the diehards believed Cheryl was this prophet of God. And it wasn't Cheryl telling us to include these other religions, it was God telling us through Cheryl.
And the people that sit within the temples and the sanctuaries will not be held captive anymore by your hands.
She really was the joy in the center of this congregation. People wanted to be close to her. She was enigmatic, charismatic. She had a knack of reading people in the moment they met.
In the beginning, it was a place that you wanted to go because you felt that freedom, you felt that warmth, you felt that acceptance.
Come into the place where you can taste of what was and what is to be, that you walk in the wisdom of all ages.
As time progressed, we started getting into Catholic mysticism. We got into Egyptian alchemy, and then it was paganism and Wiccan and Mother Earth and chakras and crystals. There was a lot of talk about the end times. There was definitely this sense of dread, and something bad was about to happen. And we had, our only salvation was following Cheryl.
I didn't believe in what she was doing, but I wanted to stay close to my children because I was trying to figure out how exactly I could get them out of this thing that they were trapped in. But in a cult situation, you can't have any dissension. So anybody that doesn't believe has to be separated and culled from the group. She decided, well, I'll use the police to get rid of Mark. Cheryl accused me of pushing her. I didn't touch Cheryl. I spent a night in jail. And that's actually the night I said, okay, I have to call my divorce attorney. I got to get out of this.
Whatcom County dropped the charges against Mark because there was no evidence to support Cheryl's claim he was violent. Even so, it appears Cheryl has cunningly manipulated the criminal justice system to get the result she desired.
During the divorce, it was taught that I should never say anything negative about Cheryl in front of the kids. So what I tried to do is just love the kids. I tried to be dad to the kids. And then you find out that Cheryl was telling them to pray for my death, was telling them at dinner to go around the table and figure out ways to kill me. I was being a nice person. And it was very frustrating because I could see that I was losing. I didn't know what to do about it.
When the divorce was finalized, the custody arrangement was in fact a 50-50 split. And as Mark feared, it created a permanent fracture in his relationship with his kids. For Cheryl, sowing family division is part of a pattern.
I was a churchgoer in North Vancouver, and that's where I first met my wife. We got along famously. You know, the first 3 years of our marriage, we did almost everything together. But in 2002, things took a bit of a turn. And that's when I was first informed about Freedom Fire Ministries and Cheryl. She just announced that she and her friend had been going there for some time. I was quite surprised by that because I worked 2 out of 3 Sundays. And on the Sundays that I was off, we were going to our church as though nothing was going on. And then, one day she just outright said that she was going to a place across the border and she wanted me to come. From the moment I said I would go, the demeanor of my wife and her attitude towards me changed, like total turnaround. All of a sudden, she was in love with me again.
What makes your covenant cut a full circumcised heart?
Cheryl would literally have everybody totally focused on her, every word.
No fruits. They can't even sustain themselves, yet pour into somebody else. How come, people?
That was her favorite thing. Come on, people.
How much would you cast in, people?
On one occasion, I was there, and she had a pitcher of water and a new box of salt. She walks up to it, pours the salt into the water, stirs it up, and says, I need everybody to come up and drink of the salt water to purify, our souls or something along those lines. I can't help but think back in my mind about the Jonestown experience and how Jim Jones had run many trial runs prior to the poisoning of all his people that had followed him.
Jim Jones was a Messianic American cult leader in the 1970s who convinced followers, including women and children, to drink fruit punch laced with cyanide. The mass suicide resulted in the deaths of 900 people, including Jones himself. So this little saltwater communion that Rod observes is incredibly alarming.
This was a trial run. And I think she was taking note of any hesitancies, but I didn't see much of that at all. Everybody was willing to go and do it. My wife has now been there for at least a year, maybe longer, and my children exposed under this crazy ranting and raving about end times. I can just picture my wife ushering my children up to the Kool-Aid and hear her drink. Yeah, I was scared.
Kind of rusty. I was born into a Christian home. At a very young age, I knew I had to hide my true self. My first crush was on the girl in first grade, and I was in kindergarten. But because of the religious upbringing, I just knew I needed to hide that part of me. It was a time of fear, depression, sorrow. I would constantly be at the altar trying to pray the gay away. When I was 17 years old, I decided I'm going to teach myself to play the piano. I very much felt like everything was spiritual, everything was from God. So this gift of music was from God. So 2004 came along, and I was 27 years old at the time. I didn't feel like I truly fit into a spot where I could show my gifts in music. And I was looking for something more.
I say, God, I'm standing at the crossroads. I've heard the word, Father. Give me the guts to make the choice.
When I started attending Cheryl's church, it was lively. There was life. People were joyful and joyous. And my sister Rachel, she joined the ministry at the same time that I did, or quickly thereafter. One Sunday morning, I was sitting at the piano and Cheryl was sitting on the front row. And I just started playing and singing. And when I started singing, Cheryl started to weep and fell to her knees and started praying and crying. She's telling me, you have a gift inside of you. And when you speak to people, they will hear and they will be healed. And I'm like, what? Yes, this is what I want. This beautiful, eloquent woman is speaking to me of what I dream of. So that connection between us was pretty strong.
Cheryl's power as a cult leader includes her ability to identify the needs and desires of others. But it's what she does with that knowledge that makes her dangerous.
I was definitely enamored by Cheryl. As she started drawing me in closer, I was falling in love with her, I guess you could say. One evening, she invited me to meet her at our church. We're in the church at the altar. It's just us. The lights are low. I went down to kneel next to her. And she turns to me and says, "It's time for you and I to go into covenant." Meaning not necessarily like a marriage, but like being one with the other person. You trust each other, you belong to each other, and you do the work of the Lord together. And she said, for us to be in covenant, we have to kiss. So there on that altar floor, I went in 110%, and I kissed her. It's hard to talk about. It felt like forever in that moment, like I found the person I was going to be with forever. There were times she would tell me, "Now what you and I have, this isn't homosexual. This is from God." But there would be services where she would preach against homosexuality. Then a couple nights later, like, "Yeah, we're banging." I would say there probably was some conflict in my heart on that, but I was ready to lie my face off because I finally had what I wanted in a relationship with another woman. It was magical for those first 4 months. And then things changed. She had me in her bedroom and we're sitting on her bed and she says, "This part is over. This part is done. We are no longer together like that." Everything went into like this whirlwind of heartbreak and I was crushed. I was in love with her. I was in the worst place in my life I have ever been in. When I look back at Cheryl pursuing me, I think it was about the music. I think it was about me bringing that extra oomph to what her ministry was through music. Looking back, that's what she wanted. But the sad part of it is I didn't leave the ministry. I believed that if I left her, that I would be in a horrible accident or I would just simply die because I stopped believing in her. And that's how deep she got into my psyche. That I could never leave her or God would strike me dead.
I'd like you to tell me what you hear.
Ringing.
It's not done yet. My name is Sanjan. I met Cheryl online on Spiritual Singles in June of 2009. She had her own church, about 100 to 125 people in her congregation in 2009 when I was involved with her. She was well kept, the family was well kept. She looked good in lingerie. But the relationship was mostly compliance with Cheryl, and that went downhill really quickly. She didn't like the art I had in my house. I had paintings hanging, and among them are a couple of nudes. She declared the paintings portals for evil. She demanded that they be burned. I took $50,000 of the most beautiful paintings in the world and burned them in the backyard fire pit at Cheryl's demand. And I can still to this day not believe that I did that. I knew better. I looked at myself and said, how come I was such an idiot?
In her relationship with Sandra, Cheryl is clearly harnessing her ability to control, but this time on a subject outside of her church community. It's not long before Cheryl returns her focus back to the congregation and pushes them to new and strange places.
Cheryl had this knack of bringing in a new religion or a new practice and tying it to what we were already doing. We would be doing Catholic mysticism one night, and the next night we're out in the woods together around a fire singing songs to Mother Earth. As Cheryl began this direction with her congregation, she said it's time to start adopting cats.
Now, cat obsession in religion isn't entirely new. For example, the ancient Egyptians believed that cats were vessels that could be inhabited by their gods. But like most things Cheryl Ruthven adopts, she pushes her version to the extreme.
The message Cheryl would give about these cats were they were of God. And if we save these cats today, we will be saved in the day of the apocalypse. And that's when we changed to Eva's Eden.
Our shelter is a cage-free shelter. That means everyone can really interact with the kitty that they think is the right one for them.
Eva's Eden became a nonprofit organization that we started to go to shelters throughout Washington, and we would take their cats that were on the roster to be put down. We would bring them into our homes. We would bring them back to health, feed them, care for them, and then start taking them to Eva's Eden, which was now a public place people could come to on the weekend to adopt cats.
The cats that were there were adorable. I mean, who wouldn't want to adopt those cats?
But the thing about Cheryl, 1 or 2 cats saved was not good enough. So she began working with shelters across Washington. Volunteers would pick up between 30 to 50 cats, sometimes more.
People were required to leave their homes, their jobs, to come straight to the sanctuary to pick up their chosen cats. Cheryl would stand up and say, when you take these cats home, they are your #1 priority. They come before your husbands and wives, and they come before your children. So they had to be fed first. All their areas had to be clean and spotless before you could even have breakfast and then get your children off for school. And then she made it a competition. She would say, well, they've got 35. Why can't y'all step up? Y'all need to step up. You have 20 cats in one room and the other 25 roaming your house. We had litter boxes literally in our living room, our dining room. It was disgusting. You could never keep the litter boxes clean. Have you ever smelt of a litter box that had not been cleaned in days or weeks? Well, multiply that about 100 times, and that's what your house smells like. I was pretty much a basket case. I was short-tempered. I cried a lot. I had a lot of meltdowns. When these cats came, if we said no, Cheryl would publicly humiliate you. I have examples of people being exiled from the church when they disobeyed her. They lost their jobs. They lost their housing. They lost their footing. I can't tell you how. She just had the connections.
What's your best? What do you treasure?
The cats were important to Cheryl because they were to be the vessels that would save all of us, I guess. The cats would eventually turn into a human. I don't know how to put it in words because it doesn't make sense. She went from being a woman of God
And God is really trying to teach us we love the person, but we don't like the spirits.
to a nutcase.
Our killing is a death spirit. He's very powerful. And so that's what you're sensing. He's on his way.
I would go home and say to my husband, Ricky, I cannot do this. I don't care if she's called a prophet. I don't care if she's the one. I will never put Cheryl over you. And I will never put Cheryl over God. When I shared that with Ricky, he's like, we've got to get out of this, Connie.
How deep has the covenant cut in your hearts?
The demands that Cheryl is placing on these families are outrageous. The only bonds that they have left are to each other, to their loved ones. Cheryl is really testing their devotion to her. One of the questions I have is, what will Cheryl do if they finally break?
I went to my friend's house. She opened the door and I just fell apart. And I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. My kids have to come first, not the cats. My friend held me tight, let me cry. But I didn't even get home 15 minutes before there was a knock on the door because she had already told Cheryl everything that I had shared with her. Everything. This is evil. You have to have permission for everything. You can't leave. You can't go anywhere. You have to be approved by the prophet. And I knew that Cheryl would publicly humiliate our family, humiliate our children, do things that our kids could possibly never get past. I wasn't willing to let my children be humiliated. Never.
Cheryl's control over her followers is powerful enough that members are policing each other on her behalf. So you have to wonder, how much worse will it get?
Lots of family photos of just good times through the year. But as we continued to be a family, you know, the anger grew on the part of his children. Their resentment became more and more apparent. I always felt like they were really being used as pawns by Cheryl. Like they were vehicles for her anger toward Mark. But there came a time when Mark came to the realization that if I ever saw his children, that I should run the other way and call 911 because there was only one reason why they would be here, and that would be to kill me.
You wanna come up here? This is her favorite spot. Ugh. Come on. That's where she loves to lay down and look at her kingdom. I knew I was in a cult, so about 2007, 2008. There was a point in time where Cheryl shut the doors and no newcomers could come in. We became a secret religion. And the cat rescue was a front that we hid behind. That's what the outside saw. They didn't see what was on the inside. Our homes were filled with cats. Cats, 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 cats. If you can imagine the distress a cat's in, with being around 30 cats, what are they gonna do? They're gonna piss on the walls, they're gonna scratch the carpet, they're gonna scratch the walls. A typical home had between 14 and 30 cats in it. I had 17 in my home at that time. The home usually smelled like bleach, a combination of bleach and cat piss. People's homes were being destroyed. People were losing sleep. Cheryl would have us being up every 3 hours to make sure that they're okay and feed them and clean them. It was overkill. It was too much. I think that's probably where those seeds started to grow in my mind that this is a little bit bull. My sister and I were so close, but we were always afraid to talk to each other about our true feelings. Like, We never talked about our concerns about what was going on, because if I told Rachel, or if Rachel told me something, what if Rachel told Cheryl what I just said? People would do this. People would tattle on other people, and then when Cheryl found out, she would act upon it swiftly. She publicly humiliated people all the time. I knew I needed to get out of there, but I was so groomed, or I was so afraid I couldn't act on it, and I didn't want to leave my sister.
I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. I am the beginning and I am the end. I am the start and I am the finish.
This is really dangerous. Cheryl is demanding trust from all her followers, but she's also creating distrust within the group, weakening the bond they all have with each other. And she's always looking to push it one step further.
We, as a ministry, went and saw Da Vinci Code together. And that is probably the pivotal point of Cheryl beginning to say she is Mary Magdalene. She has come back to the earth now as Cheryl, but she truly is Mary Magdalene.
It's interesting that Cheryl chose Mary Magdalene, because we know that she pulled her inspiration from religious texts, from pop culture, from all over. And in the early 2000s, the Da Vinci Code was hugely popular. First the novel and then the movie. The revelation in Da Vinci Code is that Mary Magdalene was no prostitute. She was Jesus's wife.
My bride is coming forth in power, cloaked in my son's blood in this hour. Bride of power, people.
Cheryl is now portraying herself as Mary Magdalene, wife of Jesus, and her followers are buying it.
Communions with Cheryl, at times she would prick her finger or cut it and then squeeze the blood out into the communion, and then we would drink the communion because she was basically female Jesus and we were to consume her blood. It kind of grossed me out a little bit, but you conform. Everybody does conform, or you pay the price. So I drank the communion with her blood in it.
Cheryl is constantly pushing her followers out of their comfort zone, testing their boundaries, keeping them on their toes. But as she refines her control tactics, you have to ask yourself, what is she ultimately after? What's the point of all this?
I was expecting a income tax return check. We had already talked about using to pay off some bills and maybe get a little bit ahead, not much, right? The check arrived and I didn't know about it. My then wife took the check to the bank and cashed it and took the money out and opened another bank account. I had felt in my mind that maybe she was planning something.
When that transpired, I became concerned. Something just didn't feel right. Hi, I'm Rod's sister. My name is Carol.
Rod has something that not everyone has in this situation. He's got family members outside Cheryl's grasp who know how to research, and that's what they do. His sister Carol compiles a file of all sorts of correspondence with Cheryl, thinking maybe we're going to need this down the road.
What happened next was what happened in September when my brother, out of the blue, was given an ultimatum.
She came up to me and said, you know, I have until the September 24th to submit to Cheryl and her teaching, leadership, I believe she actually called it leadership, and turn over the family finances to my wife, or she was going to leave with the children.
That's stunning that somebody would say something like that to a spouse, that if you don't comply with what I want from you, I'm going to take everything you value from you. How much worse can it get? It's as bad as it gets.
That was a Saturday, and on a Monday, I went to work as I always did. Everything was normal in my household. And I came home from work, and the house was empty. And I went into my son's room, and there were all these goodbye cards. I had absolutely no idea where my children were, where she was. I came to understand that she had been plotting this for some time.
Now, that was on a Monday. Tuesday, we were in court. Well, all the research was ready to go. We got before the judge that day, and Rod went through everything systematically.
The judge alluded to the fact that my wife had surrendered her autonomy to Cheryl. The judge at that time believed that Cheryl and the ministry and its members posed a clear and present danger to the children.
My brother was given interim sole custody, sight unseen, even though we did not know where the former wife and the children were. So for the next number of days, we were racking our brain trying to figure out where they could be.
I was terrified. Where is my wife gone? If she made it across the border, they're gonna hide her. And who knows where? Am I ever gonna see my kids again? You know, my worst fears had come to fruition.
The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent will take it by force. There's the cut of covenants.
My wife was gone. We still didn't know where she was. They were gone for 8 days, and I received a phone call. And she said she was going to return the children to me because the court had ordered her to do so.
So the children are with Rod, and for 6 months, Rod and his wife attended marriage counseling with a minister whose focus was on reconciliation.
My wife declared in this counseling that she was no longer going to Freedom Fire and that she had returned to the church where she and I had met. I ultimately believed that she had left because, 6 months had gone by. Every sign had showed that she was not attending there. We would go to the court and announce that we were forgoing divorce and that we were going to return together as a family.
Now, there's another element to this plan. Rod agrees to let the children change their primary address to her house while they look for a new house that the family will eventually move into, and they'll all be back together, reunited. But it doesn't turn out the way Rod expected.
I remember her sitting in a lounge chair in her backyard, and I went to talk to her, and she said, I've been going to Freedom Fire the whole time. I've now established status quo with the children here, and I'm keeping them with me. It totally blew my mind. Everything was going in the right direction. My family was about to be restored, and now it was all a dream. I was financially broken, emotionally broken, and I did not have the means to fight.
She has deceived him. She's tricked him into getting the kids because she knows that now that the kids, with his consent or with her, it's going to make it that much harder to unwind it and for him to get the kids back. Now, the financial angle to Rod's situation is interesting. It sure seems that Cheryl and his wife intended to shake him down. But if you look more closely, a pattern seems to emerge. It sure looks like Cheryl creates division among her followers and then exploits them for financial gain.
Cheryl always spent more than I made, and I made a pretty good living. In the divorce settlement, if you calculate everything that I gave her in that package, it added up to about $750,000. Even though she told the congregation and my children that I wasn't paying child support, that I'd left her destitute.
All offerings that we give within our temple are not equal offerings. Our tithes we are commanded to do.
Cheryl would just rail into us over and over again, tithe and offerings, give money for this, give money for that. I definitely gave above and beyond. When I did cash out on my ESOP with the company I was with, I had about $100,000 in my pocket, and I would say at least half of it went to Cheryl. But money wasn't truly going to where she said it was going. It was to better enhance her and her family's lives.
Cheryl had millions. We barely had thousands. But she wanted everybody's. In 2009, we adopted our 6th kid. That particular year, the Internal Revenue, they were paying adoptive families monies back, especially if you were adopting special needs children. We ended up with the refund being $28,000. We gave her $7,000 of it, not to mention the amounts of money that we gave toward the cats. Cheryl was getting the cats from the shelters at no cost. But we did have to pay for all the food and the litter, and then we had to pay adoption fees. Then all of that went into Cheryl's pocket. Each cat was no less than $75. And even if you adopted 2, you still didn't really get a break. You still had to pay $150. We would have to buy particular cat food, the particular cat litter, and we had to buy it from Cheryl. Cheryl bought it in Watts, and then we were required to buy it from Eva Zedin. It was actually very costly. And, you know, for us to find out later on that the monies that we were giving was going for her to have plastic surgery, breast implants, and increase her woman size or whatever, it hurt me.
This is unbelievable. She is a consummate grifter with 150 followers. Each household has at least 20 to 30 cats. It seems like she's making probably hundreds of thousands of dollars off the backs of her followers. It's almost like this twisted parasitic game. Once she has a follower compliant, she's going to extract all the value she can. And the key to compliance is to separate her followers from the people that give them strength. You divide and you conquer. You divide, you conquer. It goes on and on.
And the blood came from the mercy seat, and it bubbled and it came down.
The sacrifice.
You were family until you weren't. She wanted us separated. I think that if she had her way, she would have separated Ricky and I. And Ricky did speak that one time. He's like, I feel like she's trying to tear us apart, and I don't understand why. He says, I believed that she was real in the beginning, but if she's a real, true prophet of God, why is she trying to separate us? We were getting phone calls about my father-in-law and how he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and how we needed to get home if we wanted to have any time with Dad. And so I know it may sound awful, but we used that, and we didn't let anybody say no. We took a trip. We come all the way down to Louisiana. I could actually tell you the date. It was July 5th, 2012. We drove out of Bellingham, Washington. It was truly a freedom. And it wasn't until after we got out that she figured out that we were not standing behind her. We did not tell Cheryl exactly where we were going. It was for our own protection. I know they still were rough a little bit after we moved to Louisiana, but they weren't as rough as they were in Washington. And we didn't adopt you so that you'd have a miserable life. We adopted you so you could have a good life.
My name is Faith Hughes, and I am Connie Gibbs' daughter. I was adopted at the age of 6, so when we left Washington, I think I was 12. I think if we did not leave, I don't know what would have happened to our family, but I don't think that we would probably be together.
I don't think we would be together now either, if we hadn't left. You understand the danger that we were in the middle of? Just I
guess this is where I should tell you I'm sorry.
When we went down to Louisiana, I was glad that they did that. I wanted friends, and I wanted my family, and I wanted my happiness. So I was actually very grateful that it happened the way it did.
It was Olivia's 18th birthday. I had lunch with her the Wednesday before her birthday, and I told her that I wanted to give her a present and that I wanted to see her on her birthday. And so I was surprised on her birthday when I couldn't get a hold of her and her phone was dead. So then I tried Cheryl's phone, and it was dead. And then I tried the boys' phone, and they were dead. And so I thought, well, I better go out to the house and see what's going on. I went up to the house. I saw there were no cars in the driveways, and I could see in the window that all the furniture and everything was gone. And I initially rang the doorbell, and then I could see in the door it was completely empty. I was frantic and devastated, and I called my wife, and I was at a loss for what to do. Where could they be? I had no idea what was happening.
Cheryl's move was based on her youngest daughter, Olivia, turning 18. Midnight of that night, all phones that they had were turned off. All phone numbers that Mark Walker had ceased to exist, and they traveled to Tennessee that night. Cheryl told all of us in church services, lie to leave. So the kids were lying to their father. He had no clue. Just one day they were gone.
Prior to Olivia becoming 18, there was a parenting plan that said that we'd share 50-50 custody until she was 18 and graduated from high school. So I then went to the school, and I got to the school, to the counselor, and the counselor said, oh, didn't you know that she graduated early, that she graduated a month ago? At that point, I knew that they were gone, and I was never going to see my kids again.
I really feel it was because Cheryl wanted to give it to him. She wanted to teach him a lesson that would break his heart in two. She succeeded in doing a very cruel thing to him.
It's painful. I mean, it's painful at the time. It's painful now. The question is, what should I do about it, or what could I do about it? I wish I had the answer to that. I really do.
Everything indicates that Cheryl had been planning this move for years, and that she felt Mark's presence in the life of their children was a constraint on her spiritual ambitions. I mean, she allegedly tried to have the guy killed, for goodness sake. Now that she's escaped the watchful eye of her nemesis, what's next? What does she plan to do?
Do you not know that I am perfecting you in this? That I am creating something so beautiful, something that I wish to call forth with such a power in this hour, but it only comes by the hand of some.
As we were preparing to move, Cheryl said, "You don't tell anybody you're moving because of me or the cats." I was going to caravan with this family that was driving this bus for Cheryl. And in the bus was cats, chickens, guns, and gold. We were moving all the precious items for Cheryl. It was so shady.
What kind of guns?
So the guns were in the long cases. So whatever kind of gun you would hold like this. I was in turmoil. I was lying to my parents about why I was moving. I was lying to my job and people I cared about at my job while I was leaving. It felt like boulders in my heart to have to lie. I knew I needed to get out of there, but I was so groomed, or I was so afraid I couldn't act on it.
Eventually, Mary on Facebook was doing searches, and somebody posted that Cheryl and Olivia bought a horse in Tennessee, and that's how we ended up finding them.
When she moved to Maury County, she bought a 42-acre piece of property up on a hill with cash for almost $1 million.
I called the sheriff and said, I would like to have a welfare check done on my adult children. The sheriff, instead of calling my adult kids, called Cheryl, who's their abuser in my mind. Cheryl, of course, told him that I was a terrible human being and, you know, I'm the devil. And so when I called back to the sheriff, he basically said, well, you're abusive, you're not to be in contact with them, and if you come here, we'll arrest you.
When I found that out, that really pissed me off. Why would a man who's a law enforcement officer make a call like that? My guess was he saw the voluptuousness of her top end. I could be wrong, sorry to his wife, but they were bowling balls in a tight sweater.
Now, remember when Rod got that court order that prevented his ex-wife from taking the children and moving into the United States? Well, because of that court order, his ex-wife and children could not move with Cheryl to Tennessee, but they did continue to follow her from afar.
I knew that my former wife, given the opportunity, would pick up, drop everything, and go to wherever Cheryl would go. She was so locked into everything Cheryl presented to her. Unfortunately, my children today are still, through their mom and her connection, still with Cheryl, under her control.
What would you say to anyone who's watching who still follows Cheryl?
My advice is run. Run as fast as you can, as far as you can. Grab your family, leave everything behind, and go. Get away while you can. You could be next.
The words she uses, the pulpit that she uses, the power she invests upon herself to suggest that she's God here on earth, and to utilize even her sexuality to draw people into her web. That's dangerous. I've heard people say, oh, she's done so much for me. I have to ask, what has she done for you? I moved to Columbia, Tennessee, got a job, was trying to make ends meet, living with all these families and cats, and it wasn't fun. I wanted out of her control. I wanted out of this ministry. I wanted to live my life and be me. So I produced music. I met another musician, and we clicked right away. And I began to confide in her this hell that I was living in, and I don't know how to get out. Where do I go? You know, I've got 14 cats still in my care, and she says, just move in with me. Just leave, and we'll make it work. She gave me the courage to leave. I came out to my sister and said, Rachel, this is the relationship I had with Cheryl. We had an intimate relationship, and I'm gay, and I met another woman, and I've fallen in love with her, and I'm leaving the cult. And my sister cried, and I cried, and we finally were able to tell each other all the painful things that we went through under Cheryl.
Mary's experience perfectly illustrates why cult leaders like Cheryl isolate their followers, because social interactions are the biggest threat to their influence. Sometimes all it takes is one ally. It could be a friend or it could be a family member to empower, to convince the follower to just walk away.
I said, Cheryl, I met someone online. I've fallen in love with her, and I'm leaving to live with her. I'm done. She started love bombing me again. She would send me these letters, emails of how much she cares for me and that she needs me in her life, and please don't leave. And I said, no, I need to go. I've seen other people walk away from her and she turned nasty and vindictive. She was not that way with me.
The next day or two, I got a call from her strongman, the Muscles, saying, you need to destroy everything you have, pictures, songs, videos, you destroy it right now. And I was so desperate to get out of her claws. I was like, fine, I don't care, I'll delete everything. And I did, and I regret it. I should have just said I would. And no, I deleted almost everything. The reason why I think she was much softer with me is because she's afraid of what I'm doing right now. I'm talking about my story, and I'm stepping up to say, this is what happened.
After we became aware that Cheryl might have commissioned a hitman to kill us, we decided that the best defense is a strong offense. As soon as I found out where they were, I put up the Facebook page, Is There a Cult in Columbia, Tennessee? Just trying to make people aware of, the devil next door. And then it evolved into a vehicle for other people to tell their story.
Mary Walker's online efforts draw the attention of a journalist who eventually publishes a long-form essay about Cheryl's ever-evolving cat-centric ministry. As the public in Columbia, Tennessee is becoming more aware that a despot lives among them, Cheryl's paranoia grows.
I was home and, I had hoped that Cheryl had been long, but in the past, on a rare occasion, I decided to look up her name. And up comes this podcast.
From Past Media, this is The Opportunist, a podcast about regular people who turn sinister.
We shot and shot and shot. We shot 1,000 rounds probably.
This person by the name of Rick Madrid is essentially admitting that he had been in a conspiracy recruited by Cheryl Walker Ruthven to commit murder in Washington State.
Now, keep in mind, while Cheryl's congregation knew who Rick Madrid was, prior to his appearance in this podcast, the alleged plot to murder Mark Walker was not widely known.
I thought that her and I, once we consummated our marriage, that Mark was going to die. She had her whole church pray for Mark to die. The whole church. So she pounded it in my head that he's got to go.
What Rick Madrid said in the tape, that's alleged. We don't know. But should it be investigated? Absolutely.
Mark and Mary Walker did not learn about this alleged attempt on Mark's life for several years, and they never reported it to the police, so it's never been investigated properly. There are a lot of questions about this whole affair, so we tried to locate Rick Madrid, and we were surprised by what we found.
Hello?
Hi, is this Rick Madrid?
No, Rick Madrid passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, he did?
Yes, he did. He had sleep apnea, and they claimed, the doctors claimed that he just died in his sleep.
Oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that. I had some questions about his experience with Cheryl. Do you know anything about Rick's time with Cheryl?
No, I sure don't. He moved out there to Washington and was up there about a year and then came back home and didn't talk about any of it.
So Rick appears on this podcast, and months later he dies. Could that be a coincidence? Absolutely. We know that Rick was living in New Mexico when he passed. And New Mexico does not release death certificates to anyone but family members. And we couldn't locate a published obituary, so we cannot independently confirm his death. For former followers of Cheryl, that raises a lot of questions.
She has a finesse about her that convinces people to do whatever she wants. The fact that he backed out of what Cheryl would want him to do, and the fact that Rick went public with it, put a mark on his back. I believe Cheryl is dangerous, but I believe she's more dangerous with the power that she gets over people because she's the prophet.
I find it suspicious that he died of unknown causes. Cheryl did ask Rick supposedly to assassinate her husband. What else does he know that could damage her and her reputation even more than it is already? I believe Cheryl could potentially be capable of orchestrating someone's passing. And if she can ask for that to happen, what else can she ask for if she feels cornered and has no other way out?
I got a message from one of the producers saying, is there any way that Rick Madrid may have passed away? I was kind of surprised and upset by it because Rick ended up being a good friend. Like, if you can be friends with your hitman, we were friends with the hitman.
We've been told that Rick died of sleep apnea. It's possible, but be kind of unusual. We've been told he had a brain aneurysm. Some have suggested that Cheryl paid him off to disappear. But what is consistent is that everyone we've spoken with who knows Cheryl and heard of Rick's passing thinks his alleged death is suspicious.
Right now, we're traveling into Bellingham from our home. I have an appointment with Rick Madrid's nephew, Randy. There's so many questions surrounding Rick's death. You know, like, everybody that knows Cheryl knows what she's capable of. We're concerned for Rick because, you know, there's questions like, did he die of natural causes? Was he killed? Was he killed by somebody under the influence of Cheryl? And I'm hoping that Randy can answer some of them. Yeah, I'm gonna grab this. Hey, Randy! Okay, so hide the camera. Hide the camera, I'm going back in. Holy.
Your papers?
Rick told him that Cheryl wanted him to kill us.
Yeah.
So I just got done speaking with Randy and confirmed everything that Rick had told me on the phone back in 2016. Well, yeah, and it wasn't just Mark. He said, you know, that Cheryl wanted him to kill Mark, myself, and our whole family.
Now, Rick obviously spoke about the attempt on Mark's life on a podcast, but this is new. We did not know that Rick was allegedly tasked with killing Mark's entire family.
He knew that Rick has passed away, but he is not sure how he passed away. He's heard several stories from his family, and they've all given him a different story.
So why are we even theorizing about Rick Madrid's death? So if Cheryl is complicit, then this doesn't look good for her, to her followers, and to the community if it gets out. Now, the alleged conspiracy to murder Mark Walker can't be prosecuted because too much time has lapsed. The statute of limitations has passed on conspiracy. However, there is an angle investigators might consider when examining Cheryl Ruthven and her cat cult. It's not the most eye-catching of crimes, but it has brought down some of the nation's most notorious criminals.
People have asked me in the past, like, what Cheryl is about and what motivates Cheryl. And I think the easiest, shortest answer for that is money.
If Cheryl's doing anything illegal, it would be with money. Pilfering money from her followers, not paying taxes on it, and putting it into an offshore account. I would say follow the money.
People who spent a lot of time in the home thought that there was no delineation between personal, ministry, cat rescue. If Cheryl needed money, it was all her pot. Now she has at least 3 accounts offshore in Panama. I have no idea what's in there, but somebody should. Where's the gold? Where's the silver? Where's all the precious metals that she transported from Washington? There's so many question marks, and I still have all those question marks as we sit here today. Like, why isn't anybody looking at Cheryl Ruthven?
It has come to my knowledge that Cheryl no longer lives in Columbia, Tennessee, but she has picked up roots again and moved to Columbia, Kentucky. I think she needed to change where she lived because she was in the spotlight. From what I understand, they've started a new rescue, so it's no longer Eva's Eden, it's Da Vinci's Dream. And now it's not only cats, but now they're inclusive of dogs. My guess is, again, they're hiding behind another animal rescue.
Tax evasion and financial fraud are crimes that are prosecuted at the state and federal levels. If Cheryl's nonprofits and other entities are investigated and evidence of wrongdoing is found, it is possible she could face criminal sanctions, whether it's a fine or probation or even a prison term. In the end, any sanction imposed would pale in comparison to the pain and suffering Cheryl Ruthven has wrought on those families that she has torn apart.
The level of control that this person has. You ask me if she's dangerous, I say she's dangerous. She destroys families. She destroys people.
I haven't spoken to my children since the day they left, which is February 11th, 2013, so 11 and a half years. My children aren't children anymore, they're adults. I told them, even before they left, that what they were going through was difficult, and there'd be 30 before they figured it out. Well, they're 30 now. And I don't think they've figured it out yet. I don't know what to do there.
I am so thankful for that woman that gave me a place to land. But life happens. It wasn't meant to be with her. And I met the most incredible woman who is now my wife. She opened her heart and her family, and I have a stepdaughter now. And now I have a family, and I have this incredible career, and this beautiful home, and I didn't go crazy. I would say, if anybody's listening to this that's still stuck in a very deep, dark place with someone who manipulates you and tells you if you leave, these bad things will happen to you, I promise you it won't. You will only find life and authenticity on the other side of those lies. I still like cats. I liked cats before Cheryl tortured us with them. As you can see on my shirt, I have Black Cat, a representative of my last Eva's Eden cat. Her name is Evie. So yes, I love cats. Cheryl doesn't own cats. She doesn't own their mystery or their, peculiar ways they make us laugh. And I still love them. I love cats.